My girlfriend had no social media and avoided photos. One night, she confessed the reason behind it. I, 26M, never thought I'd be sharing something like this on Reddit, but I honestly don't know where else to turn. What started as a small quirk in our relationship has turned into something that's keeping me up at night. I met her at a local coffee shop where I'd spend my weekends working on my laptop. She would always sit in the corner, reading these old paperback novels with worn-out covers. After weeks of exchanging glances, I finally worked up the courage to talk to her. That was 8 months ago. Everything about our relationship has been perfect, almost too perfect. She's smart, funny, and somehow always knows exactly what to say to make my day better. There's just one thing that's always bothered me. She absolutely refuses to take photos together. At first, I thought it was just a privacy thing. Some people are like that, right? She told me she doesn't like how she looks in photos, and I respected that. But last week, something happened that made everything click in the worst possible way. We were at my friend's house party, and everyone was taking group photos. My girlfriend, as usual, politely declined to be in any pictures. Later that night, I was helping clean up when I found an old photo album. My friend's wife was showing me some pictures from their college days, and that's when I saw it. There she was, my girlfriend. Except the photo was dated 2008, and she looked exactly the same as she does now. Exactly. The same smile, the same dimple on her left cheek, even the small scar near her eyebrow. But that's impossible, right? This photo was taken 15 years ago, and my girlfriend is supposed to be 24. I tried to act normal for the rest of the night, but my mind was racing. When I got home, I started digging. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I needed answers. I went through every social media platform I could think of. Nothing. Not a single photo of her anywhere. Her Facebook profile was created just last year, with only a profile picture that's clearly an art piece. Then I remembered something else. She never eats at restaurants, always getting takeout instead. She works from home, but never on video calls. She doesn't have a driver's license, says she prefers walking or taking Ubers. All these little things I'd dismissed started forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. Yesterday, I decided to confront her. I invited her over to my place and showed her the photo from my friend's album. The look on her face. I've never seen anyone go so pale so quickly. She didn't say anything for what felt like hours. Then she just got up and walked to my window, staring out at the setting sun. I guess we need to talk, she said, still facing the window. But not here. Meet me at the coffee shop where we first met. Tomorrow at midnight. I wanted answers right then, but something in her voice told me I shouldn't push it. She left shortly after, and I've been sitting here typing this out, trying to make sense of everything. The coffee shop is usually closed at midnight, but she insisted that's when I should come. Part of me is terrified to go. Another part of me needs to know the truth. Am I dating someone who doesn't age? A time traveler? Or am I just losing my mind? The rational part of my brain says there must be a logical explanation, but nothing about this feels logical anymore. I'm meeting her in 6 hours. I don't know what I'm walking into, but I'll update this post after. If anyone has experienced something similar or has any advice, please let me know. And if I don't post an update, well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Date. I'm writing this from my car, parked outside my best friend's house. My hands are still shaking, and I'm not sure if what happened last night was real, but I need to get this out while it's fresh in my mind. I arrived at the coffee shop at 11:55 p.m. The streets were empty, and all the businesses were closed, including the coffee shop. I was about to text her when I noticed a soft light coming from inside. The door was unlocked. Walking in felt surreal. The chairs were all stacked on tables except for 2 in the corner, our usual spot. She was already there, wearing the same cream-colored sweater she had on when we first met. The only light came from a single lamp on the counter, casting long shadows across the floor. "How are you here?" I asked, looking around the dark coffee shop. "This place is closed." She smiled that familiar smile that had always made me feel safe, but now it sent chills down my spine. "I own it," she said simply. "Well, technically, I've owned it since 1987. I sat down, my legs feeling weak. She reached into her bag and pulled out a leather-bound album. It looked ancient, the corners worn smooth from years of handling. "Before I show you this," she said, her voice steady but quiet, "I need you to understand something. I've done this conversation 7 times before. Sometimes it ends well. Usually, it doesn't. But you're different. At least, I hope you are." She opened the album. The first photo was in black and white, a street scene from what looked like the 1950s. And there she was, standing in front of our coffee shop, looking exactly as she does now. The next photo, 1969, same face. 1982, no change. 1995, still identical. I was born in 1937, she said, watching my reaction carefully. I stopped aging when I was 24. I don't know why, and believe me, I've spent decades trying to figure it out. Doctors, scientists, even some less conventional experts. No one has answers. My mind was spinning. The others, the 7 others you mentioned, what happened to them? Her eyes clouded over. Most couldn't handle it. One tried to expose me to the media. Another wanted to experiment on me. One actually accepted it, but watching him grow old while I stayed the same. She trailed off, staring at something far beyond the dark windows. Why tell me now? I managed to ask. Because I'm tired, she whispered. Tired of running, tired of starting over every decade. And because you found that photo, which means I got careless. I let myself hope that maybe this time. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was warm, human warm. Everything about her was so perfectly normal, except for the impossible truth sitting between us in that leather album. There's more, she continued. The coffee shop isn't just a business. It's my anchor. Every city I've lived in, I've opened one. It's how I meet people, how I maintain some sense of normalcy. But it's also how I hide. People see what they expect to see. Just another young entrepreneur running a trendy cafe. My head was swimming with questions. How do you manage the legal stuff? Documents, records, money, and the right connections help. Every few decades, I become my own daughter or niece, inheriting the business. Technology has made it harder, but also easier in some ways. People don't look too closely at digital records if they seem legitimate. I sat there, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to run, to dismiss this as an elaborate hoax or a mental break. But the evidence was right there in front of me, in those yellowing photographs and in her eyes that had seen decades pass like seasons. What happens now? I asked. She pulled her hand back and stood up. That's up to you. I'll understand if you walk away. Most do. But if you want time to think about it, I'll be here. I'm always here. And if I don't walk away, then you need to understand what you're signing up for. I can't give you a normal life. No marriage certificate, no joint bank accounts, no social media couples photos. In 10 years, people will think I'm your younger sister. In 20, your daughter. Eventually, you'll have to move on, or we'll have to leave and start over somewhere else. I opened my mouth to respond, but she held up her hand. Don't answer now. Go home. Think about it. Really think about it. If you want to continue this conversation, come back tomorrow night. If not, she smiled sadly. Well, I've gotten very good at disappearing. She gathered the album and walked toward the back of the shop, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. At the door to the back room, she paused. Whatever you decide, please don't try to find proof of what I've told you. No photos, no recordings, no documentation. It never ends well for either party. Then she was gone, leaving me alone in the dimly lit coffee shop with a decision that feels impossible to make. So here I am, Reddit. I know how this sounds. Trust me, I know. But I saw those photos. I held her hand. Everything about her story explains all the little oddities I've noticed over the past 8 months. I have until midnight tonight to decide. Do I walk away from someone I love because of something she can't control? Or do I commit to a relationship that can never be normal, knowing it will eventually end one way or another? I keep thinking about something she said. I've gotten very good at disappearing. How many times has she had to reinvent herself? How many lives has she lived? How many hearts has she broken? And how many times has her own heart been broken? My friend is letting me crash on his couch tonight. I can't be alone with my thoughts in my apartment. Not now. I'll update again after I make my decision. If anyone has advice, I'm all ears. Though I doubt anyone has experience with quite this situation. Final update. It's been a week since my last post. I've rewritten this update about a dozen times, trying to find the right words. How do you explain a decision that will change your entire life? But I owe you all the conclusion to this story, so here goes. I went back to the coffee shop that night. How could I not? Even if I decided to walk away, I would have needed to tell her face to face. She deserved that much. The shop was dark when I arrived, just like before. But this time, she wasn't alone. An elderly man sat with her, and they were deep in conversation when I walked in. They both looked up, and I saw her tense slightly. It's okay, the old man said, standing up slowly. This is part of why I'm here. He turned to me and smiled. There was something familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. I'm one of the 7, he explained, reading my confused expression. The one who accepted it, back in 1975. We had 10 wonderful years together before I realized I was becoming a liability to her safety. He gestured for me to sit down. She called me last night, told me about you. First time she's reached out in 30 years. That means something. I sat there for the next hour, listening to him tell their story. How they met in his family's bookstore. How he'd found out her secret when an old customer recognized her. How they'd moved 3 times in 10 years to avoid suspicion. But mostly, he talked about the joy they'd shared despite the complications. The world wasn't ready then, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Maybe it still isn't. But she deserves to be happy. Everyone does, no matter how unique their situation. She hadn't said a word during his story, just sat there watching my reactions. When he finished, he stood up again, slower this time. I'll leave you two to talk. Just remember, life is short. He chuckled. Well, for most of us anyway. After he left, we sat in silence for what felt like forever. Finally, I spoke. Why did you call him? Because I needed you to see that it's possible, she said softly. That love can exist even in impossible situations. But I also needed you to see the reality of what you'd be choosing. I took a deep breath. I have conditions. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. First, no more complete isolation. I want to meet others like you, if they exist. You shouldn't have to carry this alone. They do, she nodded. We're careful about connecting. But yes, that's possible. Second, we figure out a long-term plan now, not later. I want to know what I'm walking into, how we'll handle the complications as they come up. That's reasonable, she said slowly. Third, I continued, we take one photo together. Just one. You keep it, destroy it, whatever you need to do. But I want one real moment captured with you, even if no one else ever sees it. She was quiet for a long time, considering. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an old Polaroid camera. One photo, she agreed. We'll take it now, and you'll watch me burn it before you leave. Deal? I nodded. She set up the camera on a nearby table, pointing it at our corner. We sat close together, and I heard the mechanical whir of the timer. 3 seconds later, a flash lit up the dark coffee shop. We watched the photo develop together. It was slightly blurry, poorly lit, and absolutely perfect. She looked at it for a long moment before walking to the kitchen. When she came back, she had a metal trash can and matches. I watched the photo curl and blacken in the flames. It hurt, but I understood. Some memories aren't meant to be kept in albums. So what now? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Now, I said, taking her hand, we figure it out together, day by day. That was a week ago. Since then, we've had long conversations about the future, both the immediate practical concerns and the larger philosophical questions. We've made plans, and backup plans for our backup plans. Is it crazy? Absolutely. Am I terrified? Of course. But when I look at her, I don't see the mystery or the complications or the impossible future ahead of us. I just see her. She's working at the coffee shop right now. I'm sitting in our corner, watching her talk to customers, seeing how easily she makes everyone feel at home. In a few hours, we're meeting with another couple. He's like her, his partner isn't. Apparently, there's a whole network of people navigating these same waters. I don't know how this story ends. Maybe we'll beat the odds. Maybe in 30 years, I'll be the old man in the coffee shop, telling my story to someone else facing this choice. Or maybe it'll all fall apart, and this post will be the only record of what happened. But right now, in this moment, I'm choosing to believe in impossible things. Sometimes that's all we can do. Thank you all for listening, for offering advice, for helping me think through this. I won't be updating again. We need to be careful about our digital footprint. But know that your support helped me make the hardest and best decision of my life. To anyone out there facing your own impossible choice, sometimes the craziest option is the right one. Sometimes love is worth the risk. And if you ever find yourself in a coffee shop, looking at someone who seems somehow out of time, well, maybe buy them a coffee. You never know what kind of story might unfold.